Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. I'm going to talk about day 10 of the Mass Casualty proceedings, and I'm a little late getting to the video today. I ended up watching the proceedings after the fact. I was in Halifax. Actually, I was in the Nova Centre itself today, where the Mass Casualty proceedings are taking place, but I'm just on other business. So I did watch the video, the feed from the Mass Casualty Commission, so just point out that that's a possibility, a thing that you can do. You can watch these videos at any time if you want to catch up on what's taken place, as I did today. And today was day 10, and in the videos today, we covered the issue of, there was a witness, Deborah Thibeault, called to talk about the Blueberry Field Gate and access to that Blueberry Field from the Portapique community. And then there were two foundational documents presented, brief foundational document presentations on the Hunter Road killings and then the Wentworth killing of Lillian Campbell. Just point out, by the way, I think I will try to get back to the Nova Centre and actually get to the hearings in person one of these days coming up. I'm looking at the 11th of April when they're looking at the Onslow Fire Department foundational document is the time I might go and attend in person. But watching by video, you can certainly get a sense of things. And I was watching, I'll talk about things in order as they took place. And the first thing that took place was the witness, Miss Tibbo, who is a resident of Cobequid Court, which is at the southern end of the Portapique subdivision community there. And it was, she testified for a couple of hours in the morning. It was difficult at times to follow this evidence. It really looked to me as though Ms. Tibbo was not properly prepared for her testimony. Not quite sure whose fault that might be. It can either be the individual if they've chosen not to cooperate and come in and be interviewed by counsel prior to their testimony, or usually it's the lawyer's fault for not properly going through, here are the questions I'm going to ask you, this is why I'm asking, and just sort of giving the person a roadmap of the examination to come. But that didn't happen, and it showed in the witness testimony. Don't blame Ms. Tibbo really for that, but it was some confusion. Like, for example, there's a few times when she was shown a picture and say, all right, well, what does this picture show? And in her mind, it seemed like she thought she was being asked, well, what does this picture prove? You know, a lot of when a lawyer puts a photo or an exhibit into evidence, or attempts to, they want the witness to just, all right, identify, what is this? Well, it's a picture. What is it? What does it show? Well, it shows a gate, and it shows some trees, and it shows a road. You know, not what does it prove? It proves that blah blah blah, that it must have been run over, or something like that. So that was there was some confusion in the question and answering on that, which led to questions being repeated and such, and it was slow. It was painfully slow at times, the questioning by Mr. Van Wart for the commission. Sometimes, it took really over 40 minutes before it was really obvious why she was called, why Ms. Tibbo was called. As it turned out, the reason she was called was to talk about this gate with which she was very familiar. She lives right there. She sees it every day. When she bought the place, she was told that gate, the rope should be across it, and it's your responsibility. So she would use the gate frequently and always put the rope back over the post. And if she saw that other people were using it, as often they did, and somebody didn't put the rope back up, she would do so herself. So really, that was the important part of her evidence. And it literally took 40 minutes of preliminary questions, follow-up questions, follow-ups on things that were sort of obvious answers on her part before we got to what was really important. In some situations, in other hearings, if somebody gives, well, when did you take the picture? Well, I took it before. Before what? Well, we know before what. You don't need to go back and make that obvious, or else you could suggest the answer for her and make it easy, because, her answers would sometimes, it was obvious to anybody listening what she meant by her answer, But then, if it was a little bit vague, Mr. Van Wart was following up with it. So anyway, I'm not sure what others thought of that. I thought the questioning was particularly slow. But in any event, she started by saying, it was interesting, with Miss Thibeault's evidence. A lot of it involved, this road, this gate should have been obvious. And she started one of her early questions by starting to say, well, anybody that was in Cobequid Court would have seen the gate, as though trying to imply, I thought, maybe if the officers had been down in that area at the key times early on, that they would have looked over and seen that there was a road that goes through into the blueberry field. And in fact, she said that the road was quite a good road, and she used it more regularly, it seemed, than the main road, the private road that connected to Portapique Beach Road, so and out to the main highway. So, whether it was on a side-by-side, her SUV, or even a car, she was using this Blueberry Field Road, which she says was very well maintained, well known to the residents of the area. But she noticed when she was allowed back on the property after, a few days after the killings, and she was allowed back only under very controlled circumstances. I think the first time she came back, she was only allowed there for about 20 minutes. Her house was burned down, so there wasn't, in a way, much to see. But then the next time she came back, about a week after the killings, she was there, and she said there were lots of police officers around. And, she was there talking to a sergeant and looks over at this gate, with which, again, she's very familiar, and sees that it's down. The rope was still attached to the post, which was obvious to her and obvious to me. I guess that somebody must have plowed through the gate and knocked the post over, so the rope would still stay on. So certainly clear from all that evidence that is likely the exit path that the killer took that night at some point. Now, question I have of this is, why the police didn't catch this piece of evidence a little earlier themselves. Certainly one would have expected, given what took place and how the killer escaped, that the police would be looking for an alternate escape route from the Portapique Beach Road, Orchard Beach Road area. And this was sort of the obvious choice, and it was actually told to the police a few times the night of the 18th and into the 19th. But anyway, it took them a week, it seems, to notice the gate had been knocked over, and that was likely the exit route. So certainly some issues there with the police response and the police subsequent investigation. Mr. Van Wart asked the questions. It seemed it was presented to us, at least, as though those questions were, there was some collaboration on the questions prior to him asking them. And then Sandra McCullough from Patterson Law followed up. She is representing the families and representing Ms. Tibbo in her interests, and she asked some follow-up questions as well, which clarified a few things. So that was that. It took a couple of hours, probably could have taken 20-25 minutes to get through what was really important about her evidence, but anyway, so be it. That was the morning, or most of the morning. Then we heard again from Commission Counsel Roger Burrill, who presented two foundational documents, both maybe a little over half an hour each in the presentations. One was on Hunter Road, and the other was in the Wentworth area. First dealing with the deaths of Sean McLeod and Alana Jenkins, the second one, and also Tom Bagley, and then the second dealing with the killing of Lillian Campbell. Now, these two foundational documents really drive home the importance of that emergency alert, which should have gone out overnight or much earlier, about an active shooter being in the area, and people to hunker down and certainly not respond to any police officers. They showed some video that Mr. Burrill did of the police car, the mock police cruiser, going through different areas with cameras, home cameras, and it's showing up. The police, mock police, showed up to Alana Jenkins and Sean McLeod's home in the morning. Some gunshots were heard around that time, and so certainly had there been an alert issued, Miss Jenkins and Mr. McLeod would have been alerted to that and not, would have certainly taken some kind of evasive action if they saw a police car pulling up into the yard. It was interesting too. There was Jody McBurney, one of the witnesses, who lives close by. Neighbors who also happened to know the Blairs, who were among the first victims in Portapique, had spoken with the Blairs' son, knew that the killer was Gabriel Wortman, and the RCMP vehicle situation. Well, sorry, knew the killer's name, didn't know that it was an RCMP vehicle, and had called the RCMP because he had been texting with Sean McLeod, or trying to reach Sean McLeod to alert him, knowing that he knew Wortman. Wasn't getting a response from his text messages, called the RCMP and was told, well, we'll send somebody when there's an opportunity, when somebody's free. And then, minutes later sees an RCMP vehicle passing by. So certainly one would expect, could infer that had there been an emergency alert issued, that the McBurneys would have certainly called the police again and say, well, he's here. Tom Bagley, Good Samaritan, firefighter, sees the fire or smoke, goes over to check on things, and was unfortunately killed too. So for his good deeds. So that was very unfortunate. So that was sort of the first one. Some really curious elements to the first foundational document from Hunters Road. Of course, we know that Miss Jenkins and Mr. McLeod worked at Spring Hill Institution, the penitentiary there. The killer was at their home for about 3 hours. Sounds like from the reports of when gunshots were heard that he probably killed them right away, and then, although it's speculation, and the Commission Council did not do the speculation, that he was looking around the house for something. Now what? Nobody really knows yet, but there seems to be, given that there's some connection, and there's connections with the jails in the area, that, he must have been looking for something. Seems like he was looking for something specific, took 3 hours in there, and then finally left. Left with Mr. McLeod's wallet and a jacket from the penitentiary, so who knows what use he was planning to make of those. Okay, so that was the Hunters Road issue. Some questions emerging from that, particularly why would the killer spend 3 hours in that home? Then really tragic, everything is tragic in there, but Lillian Campbell goes out for a walk. Of course, she hasn't received an alert because none was issued. Wasn't aware that there was anything wrong with going out for a walk at that time in the morning on a Sunday morning. She went for her usual walk and went along Hunter Road, and then a police car came down to where she was walking, turned around, and looks like engaged her in a conversation, and then shot her, sounds like while she was probably leaning in the window or speaking to Wortman through the window. So very, very sad thing there. And again, certainly an emergency alert would have kept her alive, and so lots of questions emerging from that as well. So those are the two foundational documents that were delivered today, that were presented. This is, again, we should remind ourselves, the Commission's version of events. Not clear if there's going to be a lot of cross-examination questions about this, but certainly when it comes to why this happened, the motives and such, want to ask some questions about the relationship between perpetrator and Mr. McLeod and Miss Jenkins. Seemed to be certainly a targeted killing, and so we'll see what evidence emerges on that front. All right, so that was it for day 10 of the mass casualty proceedings. They are back on tomorrow, and I'll be watching live, commenting occasionally as things arise, and then providing summary after the fact. So hope you found that informative. Sorry for posting late, but we'll get back on track tomorrow, and hopefully throughout the rest of the inquiry as much as I can. All right, so thanks again, and we will see you next time.